helping you crack the code to productivity. Every Wednesday's our community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Productivity Enhancement Clinic. It's been an interesting journey. So, today we're going to be specifically talking about how to align your strategy with what you want to ensure to get the performance you deserve or desire from your teams. I will specifically talk about a work that we did with the client and how we helped them, you know, ensure that their strategy that they conceived was implemented and it delivered the result that they wanted from the teams. Now, the first section is setting the scene for people who joined new. I just wanted to introduce how we approach the whole problem. And then I talk about the framework and then how companies have approached the challenge and how can we apply to our businesses or what can you learn from here that you can take and apply in your businesses. This is how I cover the session. Now, apologies for people who are already there. Apologies if I'm repeating, but this is for people who joined fresh. See, what we do is basically we focus on three things. We say for a business to exist, you need to have a good strategy. But having a great strategy or a good strategy is not enough. You need to have employees who would execute that strategy. But having employees and a great strategy is not going to help you grow the business or even the business survive. You need to have customers. So we just focus on these three things, which we feel are the vital elements for the business to survive. Now, what we do is basically we talk about something which is very specific, where employees and customers intersect. We call that as delivery. This is where employees' ability to provide the service, sell the product, all those things come into this place. The second thing we talk about is engagement. This is where the strategy and employees intersect. If employees don't understand where they are going, why they are doing what they are doing, they're not going to be engaged. As a result, they're not going to be delivering what the organization wants them to deliver. Third bit we talk about is alignment. Alignment is where your customers and strategy intersect because it is not the question of let's build something and the customers will buy it. You need to ensure that you have a constant pulse of your customers to understand their met and unmet needs and use that to build your product service, train your employees so that you can deliver and start growing your business. And what we talk about is the last bit is the dynamic core, where leadership has to be at the core of all this. And you look at this, this is like a propeller. When you leverage this properly using great leadership, things start moving in the right direction. And that's what progress happens. And what we say is to lead the organization, you need to deal with them. And deal basically is an acronym for delivery, engagement, alignment, and leadership. So, what we have been doing over the past 6 weeks now is talking about each of these areas and specific issues that we have helped companies solve in these areas. Today, we're going to be talking about how to bring all of this together. And what we do is we basically have a board game where companies actually play the board game where they look at what is happening with their customers, what's happening with their employees, and how is the strategy aligned to all this. I'm not going to go into the details of the board game, but what we do is basically get them to play the games in three iterations. It's about understanding what is it now, which basically is the third person's perspective from a strategic point of view. And if you have the car keys, how will you change it? So again, companies play the game with that perspective. And then the last bit, what we do is we get them to play the game as a unit where there is one single board where companies look at all these three areas and say, what are the things that we are doing, which are not doing, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what we need to do, and how can we move from there, and so on and so forth. So that's the board game. I mean, if you are interested to know more about it, please ping me and I'll share some information. Okay. Now, what I would love to do is basically start off with the fundamental tenet of how you can actually bring about this cultural change. Because yes, there is a mechanism that we talked about, but what we are trying to do is how do you use that mechanism? What is the thinking that's gone behind it? So that's what I want to talk about. And then hopefully give you some insights that you can take and implement in your with your teams or with your clients, depending on who you work with. Now, as an individual, when we are talking about the present, we want to say, okay, we have to move from here to there. It's always been progress, isn't it? That's how human beings are hardwired. Unfortunately, when we talk about future, as human beings, our brain is not wired for success. It's more wired for survival. So if we are actually looking at moving things, we always go back to our past experience, try and understand what is really happening, and then from there apply this. But if your past experience has been not so good, you tend to fall into a regressive cycle, which then goes down into a spiral, which we call as the death spiral. Now, if you want to break this and move from the present to the future, you need to find a way to understand what is holding you back, which we call as the limiting patterns or the fears. So let's take any job that you can think of, any team that you think of. They all have to have the physical ability to do that job. I mean, to start with, get out of their bed and go to the office or go to whatever place of work that they are going to, right? But then just that is not enough. You need to have the technical ability to then deliver. This is where traditionally we start talking about performance and what makes it different and all that stuff. But what I want you to think about is think of the most amazing team that you will see. It could be your local football team, or it could be, a rowing team, or whatever team, or even your work team. What is the best team that is there? And think about the abilities that made them special. Was it their resilience? Was it their team spirit? Was their ethos? When you start writing things down, you suddenly start seeing, yes, the physical ability is there, technical ability is there, but what differentiates them is the mental faculty. Just repeat this exercise for fun when you have some time. Just think of a team and then think of the words that come to your mind and classify it into these three categories. And you'll see a lot of things fall into the mental category because physical ability we can acquire, technical ability we can get trained, but the mental magic happens between our ears. So if you want to actually change your past, you need to help people understand this and you need to work on this. So that is where we started our journey. Now, when you look at an organization, you have the leadership, which we call as the I. You have the team, which we call as the we, right? And there are things that happen inside the organization, and there are things that happen outside the organization. As a leader, how you think and feel is perceived as the behavior by employees because they see it on the outside. Now, how leadership behavior then influences the team is how the employees feel and the culture of the organization. And then, if you want to expand that further, how employees think and feel on the inside impacts your customer experience, how your processes are there, how your people perform, what delivery happens. Everything is influenced by this. So, if you want to understand and change things, you'll have to go a bit deeper. So, that is where we start. Now, we all know that when we talk about people or the teams or any change, everything starts with performance. That is where we all start talking about things that we need to do. Now, performance, you start looking at it from a behavioral point of view. You can say, oh, he's doing that work or she's doing this. Have buzzing and all that stuff. But behavior is influenced by your engagement. Because when you go a level deeper, how you think influences how you behave. So if you've decided to quit a job, you're not going to be absolutely passionate about what you're delivering or what you're doing because hey, you're on your way out. This works with most of the people. There might be a few exceptions, but generally, when you're mentally checked out, when you think you're not going to be part of the team, the behavior starts reflecting. It becomes obvious, and that impacts performance. Now, measuring engagement is what HR does, which is a brilliant thing, where you quantify feel. And how you feel okay. So when we look at this, what drives that? It's fear. So when we go back and look at the change or the need to change, we go back to our patterns, which are past patterns, which basically, if it's a good one, yes, that will motivate you to move forward. But generally, if it is not a great one, that fear starts building up. And when that fear starts building up, it starts impacting how you think, how you feel, how you think, how you engage, and how you behave. And that impacts performance. So when you start talking about bringing change in your teams or changing the culture and linking it back to performance, you need to start understanding fear at a very elemental stage. And I just to give a bit of information about what I did as my PhD thesis was to understand how we value people consciously and subconsciously. In plain English, when you look at someone, you either like them or you don't like them. And I was trying to find out what was happening inside our heads to help us make that decision. So I did a lot of things, including psychometric tests, interviews, one-on-ones, cognitive mapping, and so on and so forth. What I realized was people at a macro level were actually using their behaviors. But when I dug deeper, they were actually using their core values to evaluate others. And when I dug deeper, the prime one which was influencing all this was fear or the lack of it. So by helping and understanding and coping with fear, we can start addressing what are the patterns that limit us, what pulls us back or what holds us back, and we can move forward. As an organization, if you can understand what and how to address this, then you are on your way to success. And that's what we started doing by working with clients. Now, when we talk of fears, there are various types of fears that are there. First thing is fear of losing. Or if I do this, what should I compromise? What will I lose? So that is a message that always goes back. So when you're trying to launch a cultural change program, or when you're trying to implement a new strategy, this is something you need to consider. What are the things people will feel? Okay, if I do this, will I lose my kingdom? Will I lose my power? Will I lose my authority? Will it work for me? Because I don't know. I've been here for 30 years. I've seen so many changes. This is going to be another flavor of the month. So that is another fear, or probably that manifests as negativity or dissent. So that then comes up. That's another fear that you need to understand. Then, will I make a fool of myself? It's about status. So when you're talking about bringing a change, that's another message that you need to include. We always hear this, oh, it's going to be difficult. I don't have time. It's time and energy and effort. That's another thing. How do you ensure that you break it down, make it simple, make it easy for people to consume or to act? That's another thing. What do I need to sacrifice? If I go here, I'll have to compromise this. Will I miss my targets? Will this happen? And if that happens, how will it impact me? So when you start talking about all this, and the last one is, will I feel like a fool? The regret bit kicks in. So when you start talking about fear, you need to understand these are the core things that are there. So when you want to then start using this to build a cultural change, you need to say, okay, how are you going to use this? So what we did was we started looking at, okay, these are the fears that you have. What is the problem that it will happen? If you don't do this, what is it going to cost us, you, me, the team, the business? And make a list of things that can go wrong if we don't do something now. It's about then building that sense of urgency. We call it as the burning platform. Then understand how that will impact customer expectations. So suddenly you start saying, okay, if we don't do this, this is how it will impact us, it will impact customers. And as a result, how are we then going to behave as a community? Because if performance is going down, stress is going to go up, culture is going to become toxic, So, what can we do differently to address this so that we build a positive community? How do we build relationships between teams, across teams, and so on and so forth? Then what we did was, okay, we need to actually have this as a process. So, operational excellence process, which focuses on the cost of inaction, understanding customers, building and using the power of teams, using a process to then deliver innovation to bring that change and make it fun. Once you do that, you can then start seeing changes happening, then identify things that are part of the core culture, and then start building a positive culture. This is what we did when we used the board game. And the board game, actually, when you play, it allows you to do this. But if you don't have a board game, you want to start this is how you start. You start by understanding the fears or what inaction could cause, address that fear, and then see how that can actually, you can take that and flip it to the customer side and then understand customers and then use that to build a community to say, this is why we are doing this. This is how we are going to be doing it. And this is what we will do. And this is who will be responsible. And that's where your excellence kicks in. You talk about the responsibilities. What is it going to change? By when? And by what method are you going to use? Traditional tools, understand your strengths, weakness. How are you going to then use that to bring about the change that you want to prevent this? So suddenly you start bringing a very cohesive workforce that knows what it is doing. And what we always try to do is, by doing this, we are always link it back to performance. It's KPIs, some key KPIs. Without that, it becomes meaningless. Like, we have done some work. We have not some work. We used to work with Leander Club, which is, if for people who don't know, that's I mean, a rowing club. Which, if it is a country, probably it has got more Olympic gold medals than most of the nations out there. And it's got, I think they have got more than 200 Olympic medals. So it reeks of excellence. So there, one message that they always used to have was, will it make the boat go faster? What can we do to change one thing, 1%? Everything, that innovation that they were talking about was, will it make it go faster? What can we do to build that culture of excellence? So that's how you start connecting everything. Now, if you want to move, as I said, in fact, I've covered this a little bit. First, understand the problem and the impact of inaction and create a sense of urgency. When we actually work with clients, we help them create what we call as the burning platforms, which basically tells you, this is what will happen if you don't do this, this, this. And going back, we can link it back to the three things. It can be from a strategic point of view, this is the impact it will have. From a customer's point of view, this is what it will have. And from employee point of view, this is the impact it will have. What we then do is basically break it down into things that need to be done very, very systematically. We help them understand, because the board game that I talked about helps understand what people are good at, what areas have got strengths, what areas have got weakness, and then they try and understand and address that to strengthen the cultural change or strengthen the strategy. When they do that, every bit of action that is implemented is tied to something which is very, very tangible, and it is tracked constantly. It could be a trust pilot rating, or it could be a customer experience rating, an NPS score. It could be your employee experience rating, or it could be absenteeism. They were tracking everything and the impact of the change that was happening. So, and the KPIs were kept simple, not lofty ones. And then what we also did was, we built teams where they were equipped with the right tools, because a lot of times we see that people actually jump into it without the relevant training or the tools to help support that transition. So it's basically measure twice, thrice before you cut. That's the principle. And we normally launch things from the top and go down from cascaded from top down. It sounds as though it's a long process, but when we do it that way, people start sensing change at the bottom by seeing how their manager or the manager's manager or the manager's manager behaves. So when it comes to the the frontline employees, they've already experienced the change, and it cascades very, very quickly. To be the shortest time that we've brought in to change the culture, we've done is 6 months with a client where we've changed everything uh, from you know very exhausted to a buzzing workforce with repeat customers. We arrested the leaky bucket and all that stuff. And one thing which we always say is act with urgency. Don't try to perfect it, because fail fast, learn quick, move on. Because if you don't do that, it is not going to happen the way you want it to. Because you start picking things, unpicking things, causes delays, and that actually pushes everything back. So then have a connecting slogan or a purpose as to why we are doing this, and ask the question, will this actually improve that? So in our organization, when we actually are looking at conversations that we're having, anything that we do, we ask a fundamental question. Is it actually going to help us communicate what we're doing to our clients effectively? Or is it going to solve their pain point A, B, or C? That's how we always have the conversation with the team. Even if it is a tech team, doesn't matter. And that's another thing. Don't operate in silos. Because when you actually start, it's not a tech problem. The tech problem is going to impact the process or the service delivery. So involve teams when you build products or structures. And the size of the teams, again, depends on the project or the nature of the transition, but build something which is manageable. Now, what have we learned from the strategy board game? One thing which we have seen is when people are clear as to what they are supposed to do, how it is going to impact what they're doing, and the overall strategy or the overall purpose or overall vision, it gets executed very clearly. It's like the coins in a chessboard. Every coin has got a place, has got a power, has got a move, and that's what you need to ensure that your team has. Then the second bit is where you talk about understanding, giving them clarity, communicate it effectively, listening, ensure that everyone understands what you're supposed to do. So, for example, what we do is basically once a change is brought in, or when people want to change a strategy, we create a visual, which means people understand, they can see it. Someone explains it and articulates it. So we try to understand and communicate it for people who are visuals and auditories. And kinesthetics, you will have to actually get them into some kind of a workshop to tell them what is happening. If it's a smaller organization, easier to bring them into one room. If it's a bigger organization, generally what they do is what we have done. We've done some major ones with 45,000 employees, where we had to actually do it virtually, but still communicate it, ensure that they understand, and have people responsible to ensure that people understand what they're expected to do. Now, a great example that one of the clients that we used to work with is John Lewis Partnership, and there it was beautifully communicated. In fact, they were part of my PhD thesis, and one slogan that stands out, like it hits you in the face, is one which I saw was every conference room they had a sticker which said, "Please switch off the lights. You're burning our bonus." It's a partnership, so it builds that sense of ownership. They have addressed the emotional aspect of it, and by saying you're burning our bonus, that goes to say, okay, you will not get that money. The fear bit that gets addressed, but it was done in a very, very systematic, very thought-provoking way, that it people understood it. You didn't have to say that, oh, we have to do this again and again and again. So communicate it clearly and ensure that people understand it. Then it's about incentivizing the right kind of behaviors. Like if you do something right, how do you reward people? Because that's what motivates. How do you create success stories? Because success breeds success. If you remember, when we started, I said we go back to our past to look at what we can do, current to move to the future. So if you want to move away from the past, you need to build a new past, which basically has a lot of success stories. So incentivizing and rewarding the right behaviors is the way that you can get the best out of your teams. And getting people to work effectively is basically what ultimately matters. Because you can have a great strategy, but if employees are not going to be part of it or they don't believe in it, it's not going to work. So, what we do is basically get teams built in small sizes, cross functional teams, cross cultural teams, depending on the size of the organization. I love the example of Amazon, which uses the two pizza rule. It says your team should be the size of, I mean, two. If you need to have a team where you feed them, two pizzas should be enough to feed them fully. So that's the size. Typically, we're looking at 5 or 6 people, depending on how hungry or you know how much you eat. But that's the thing. 4, 5, 6 is the size of the team. And then I'll talk about another model where we actually see that what works much more effectively than this when it comes to higher transition. So when you are trying to do this, absolutely clearly define what you want to achieve, ensure that you communicate it properly, the strategy is understood, incentivize the right behavior, and then ensure that you build teams, cross-functional teams that understand and execute it effectively. Now, what can we learn from this? You want to bring in change, you build something which is visual for people to see. And people see it, it actually gets imprinted. Then like you could use strategy maps, kanban boards, so many things that are visual you could use, but don't make it like graphs and structure. Make it much more engaging. Put people's pictures there. Who's responsible for that? So invest some time to build something which is very visual. So and then how do you execute it? This is what I was talking about, the squad model. I think this is Spotify's model. So they actually have various things, like they have a tribe, they have agency, they've got 5 or 6 levels. I can't remember them from the top of my head, but I mean, if you're interested, I can share that information later, which basically tells you how teams can be broken and what level of authority you need to have for what level of task. So when you actually look at it from an organization perspective, you have mini teams, micro teams, macro teams, and the holistic uh, organization working as a team. So use things like that. Break it into small steps, but have teams that actually execute it. Then, how do you measure success? That is something that you need to start looking at. Make it relevant to business metrics. Don't just say, okay, we have moved this to this. For what? And why did we do it? And how it's impacted the business performance? What has changed as a result? So go and look at that metric rather than just say, okay, this is changing, improving efficiency by 6%. To do what? Who is benefited? How is it impacting the top line, bottom line? Always go back and ask that question. Have a connecting statement as to why we are doing this. We are doing this because of, and then so that makes it easier for you to then say, okay, can we do this or not do this? Because if someone suggests, because when you're going through periods of change, when you want to implement a strategy, when you want to make it innovative, a lot of ideas will come in. So then the question is, how do you decide what is needed and what is not? So by having a question or a common theme, like will it make go faster, or will it help us achieve what we are going to achieve? That's the question, which will help you to then weed out the noise and pick up the things that are really needed for you. And the last bit is continuous improvement. Success is never happens overnight. It's the hours of work that you put in. How do you then move from point A to point B? We normally use Kaizen. Basically, it is easier for us. So again, there are so many frameworks that are available there. Japanese framework Kaizen is simple, effective, and it brings incremental change in anything that you do. So Although, even if you achieve your set objective, you can always tweak, you can always improve. It's that 1% improvement that really matters. And when you are doing that constantly, it helps you achieve what you want to achieve effectively. So, transition from strategy to an execution which is impactful becomes very, very easy. So that's me done for today. Hopefully, you found the session valuable. The next session is on how to lead with empathy and insight. It's the power of data. What do you do to leverage the power of data? And how do you use that to get the best out of your people? So that's the next session. Now, before I stop talking, all I want to say is if you're interested in knowing about the board game, please give me a shout. In fact, we can actually set it up for you to try it. And if you are interested in finding out about the productivity of your team, again, we offer a free productivity audit. Please reach out to my team or to me, and you can take it from there. Do you have any questions?